Welcome to Next Economy Now. I'm Ryan Honeyman, a partner at Lift Economy. Lift is an impact consulting firm whose mission is to create, model, and share a locally self-reliant economy that works for the benefit of all life. The goal of this podcast is to highlight the leaders who are taking a regenerative, bioregional, democratic, transparent, and whole systems approach to using business as a force for good. Our guest is Stefanie Thomas, Senior Investment Associate at the Impact America Fund. Stefanie, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Stefanie, so when someone asks you, what do you do? How do you answer that question?
It really depends on the day. But in general, I am a part of an organization that really cares about the intersection of technology, entrepreneurship, and community impact. And so in my particular role, on a day-to-day, I'm mostly out in the world looking for the best-in-class entrepreneurs that are building for-profit business models in a way that, they're operating in these multi-billion-dollar markets, but they also have a really laser focus around the impact their models are going to have, particularly on low to moderate income and underserved communities. And so for me, day to day, I'm speaking to entrepreneurs. I'm looking for the next new interesting opportunity. I'm around an investment model that we think at Impact America Fund will be able to scale in a way to impact millions of people or hundreds of thousands of people in America. And how we look at the impact is through either a health and wellness lens or education or economic sustainability. And within that, we're thinking through anything from commerce to financial inclusion to small business support. So for me, that's really where the center of a lot of my focus is. And then from there, that next phase of, once we identify, great opportunity, going through the diligence process. So managing a lot of the diligence work around how we investigate the company as well as the team and the market. And then also thinking about how we're going to bring that company into our portfolio, because we think of our portfolios as not just opportunities for investment, but also a community of founders who really care about social impact, but also have the business acumen to really scale for-profit companies. So that's the bulk of my role at Impact America Fund. But I have to say, on a day-to-day, it can look very different, for anything from going to a conference to speak with industry folks, or even looking at the latest companies maybe across the demo day platform, or heading to a community-based organization to understand more around best practices in underserved communities in terms of preventative health services, or even going to local organizations that are thinking through K through 12 education. So we're really taking a traditional venture capital approach in terms of how we structured our fund, how we analyze investment opportunities, but then we also layer in this social impact element, and a lot of that is driven by being engaged in the communities that we care about.
It sounds like you've got a very interesting job.
I love my job.
And before you got into your current work, I noticed something in your bio that said you drove 6,000 miles all across the United States, and something called the MBAs Across America. What was that project all about?
It was the vision and execution of two Harvard MBAs. Actually, Casey Gerald, who's a phenomenal individual, someone you probably should bring on for this podcast, actually, and his co-founder Michael Baker. So they put this program together, with the thought that MBAs could spend, their internship summer, between their first year and second year of business school, instead of being in the cubicle of a Fortune 500 company, they could actually use a lot of what they're learning in the classroom and in their program and deploy it in a way where they're actually working directly with small business owners around the country, folks who are creating millions of jobs for the economy. So that was the premise of it. And they thought it'd be pretty cool to have MBA students formulate their teams and then all jump in, their cars and drive across the country to actually meet up with these entrepreneurs in their respective cities to do this work, which would allow them to get a good glimpse of what's happening across the country, see America the beautiful, but then also be up close and personal with the entrepreneurs and appreciate the journey end to end. And so, this was the first year that this had launched. For those who are interested, there's actually no longer a formal program in the way that I did it, but there is an open source option for anyone who wants to take on the journey or the adventure. But for me and my team, we thought this was an amazing opportunity to really, again, support entrepreneurs who are doing a lot of the hard work day in and day out. For me personally, it was a way to better understand entrepreneurship, better understand small business ownership, better understand the day-to-day sort of grind and challenges that these entrepreneurs face, and then also seeing it through different capacities, through different perspectives. For each entrepreneur, they had a different business. We had, worked with a bio dynamic farm that in Oregon, that was doing work around growing grapes for wine. And from there, we went to North Carolina and we worked with a company that was providing small businesses with content marketing, and then another entrepreneur, worked with in Tennessee that was doing a subscription box model where they were curating local dry food products that could support local purveyors, but also allow them to expand their markets nationally by providing people across the country who are subscribers to these new and delicious food products. So we had very interesting experiences across the board. I know I learned a tremendous amount about myself personally. Some days were arduous. We would drive 22 hours in a weekend to get from one city to another. I don't know if that was the best planning, but it was something that we took on. And, through that experience, we also had to make sure that we were able to make some sort of impact within a week's time. And through that, people were saying, well, I don't know if, that's enough time to make an impact. I think for us, what we really learned is as long as you're really taking in what the entrepreneur is telling you about what their needs are and really working with them in advance to plan out what that can look like and being realistic about your capacity, you'll be amazed at how much you can accomplish. At the end of the day, it's not necessarily about you as the, AKA consultant coming in and sort of you having these aggrandized plans around how you're going to make the impact. It's really about meeting the entrepreneur where they are and understanding what their impact needs are and delivering those effectively. So what they think about the impact may be a little different from what you think about it. At the end of the day, if you're able to support them in the way that they truly appreciate, I think both sides win.
Did this experience affect or influence your decision to get into impact investing? Like, how did the impact investing piece come into your professional career?
Yeah, so I think it's a couple of influences that were impressing upon me. I think when I basically had made a decision to leave corporate America, so I'd had 6 years of experience in financial services. And through that experience had sort of, I had realized at that point in time that there was a lot more I could be doing based on the skills that I'd gained and wanting to do more meaningful work. So, while I was working in corporate America, I was also taking on side projects, working with folks to launch community-based initiatives. A lot of them were, focused on underserved communities. So really understanding needs there. But then, in my own sort of lived experience coming out of a household where my parents came from low income backgrounds. My father, he's actually a serial entrepreneur himself and really dedicated to building out a company that could support our family financially, but then also build wealth, intergenerational wealth. And that was something he was very proud of. And so having, witnessed that as a kid and taking it for granted when I became an adult, reflecting back on that, I realized where that affinity for entrepreneurs came from, and then an affinity for working with under-resourced entrepreneurs similar to those of my father. And so, that coupled with, again, a lot of the community work I was doing while I was working in corporate America, I started to identify challenges around capital accessibility. Thinking about my father, he had a very hard time getting access to small business loans, didn't really know who to go to, where to turn to get that initial capital under his belt. He ended up taking a chance on some real estate activity that was local to Washington, D.C. at the time in the 90s, and struck pretty big and was able to leverage his fortune from that to invest in a startup venture. But otherwise, would have been pretty challenging. And so, that's an outlier situation. But when you think about the overall landscape, how can we plug in to folks around capital accessibility? And so that really got me intrigued about the investing side, where capital comes from, how it's sourced. And when I decided to leave corporate America, I actually wanted to go get my MBA. I thought it'd be a great way for me to, again, better understand capital, understand investing in companies, small business, understand the small business owners. And, when I was thinking about programs, I found that University of Michigan had a pretty dynamic social venture fund that was focused specifically on impact investing, but doing that in a way that had a sort of traditional venture capital approach to it. And once I, took on the endeavor of applying to business school, I thought that Michigan would be a great fit for me to get that experience. And so that was the initial sort of dip in the water of impact investing. And I haven't looked back.
Nice. And then, so what was the story with meeting Keisha? And just so folks know, maybe you could explain Keisha's role and like how you two first met and you started working at Impact America Fund.
Keisha Cash, she's, phenomenal woman. I look at her as a pioneer in the space. She's really reimagining what social impact looks like, and particularly on the investing side, because I think she's broadening the conversation around impact. And we think about the needs of low to moderate income communities, which can look very different from, the type of business models that are, more mainstream per se. And, what she's done is she's been able to leverage her experience of working with minority-owned small businesses, and then putting together a pilot portfolio to then refine her thesis around how we can allocate more venture capital into these type of companies that are typically overlooked, and done in a way where they're profitable and high return types of business models, but they're also scalable in terms of the true and direct impact that they can make on underserved communities. So Keisha Cash, she, taking her experience, she eventually, used that education and that learning to create the Impact America Fund, which was launched in 2014. So she is the, founder, general partner of the fund. And then in 2015, I was fortunate enough to be able to come on board as a graduate fellow to work on some research around big data and how that can be used to support social enterprises. And at that time, I was able to actually get involved in a Series A funding for one of her portfolio companies, Maven. That experience was pretty incredible, leading the diligence on that, as well as helping with the investment decision on how much to actually put into the company. And through that work, I think she really felt that I'd be a value add to what she was building at the fund. And we just had a very, very good dynamic between us. And so, from that, she had asked me to join in helping her build this out once I graduated business school and completed my graduate fellowship. And so that's how I ended up coming into Impact America Fund.
Walk us through your involvement on that Series A funding round. I think it's a really interesting topic that most people don't get to see. Like, what does it really look like behind the scenes? Like, what are you doing for the due diligence, and what's sort of going on during that, like deciding how much to invest and that kind of thing?
It's pretty hectic and crazy. Well, one thing I will note is, at this stage of our fund, we typically don't lead investment. And so when you're a lead investor, you're typically putting in the largest share within a given round. And you're also dictating the terms of that round. As co-investors, Impact America Fund will typically, come in with another investor that will be a lead investor, that has already set up the terms that they prefer. But then there's, obviously input that we provide around that if necessary. So, with that being said, working very closely with the lead investors at the time, it was Andreessen Horowitz. So it's pretty cool to be able to engage with that team and basically leverage their expertise and knowledge around putting these structures together to do an investment. We had done a lot of, extensive research on the company already because we had already, done like a smaller seed investment in them before this bigger Series A round. But, we had to do more extensive work around what, our allocation could look like, making sure that we had a certain, percentage in the company that would reflect our dedication and commitment to the company's growth, while keeping in mind, the fact that we are a pretty small fund. We actually consider ourselves a micro fund, and micro funds are typically funds where assets under management or amount of capital they have to deploy is less than 50 million. So, with us being a relatively small fund and a new fund, we also wanted to be able to put a stake in the ground with this company, but also have enough to spread around for other opportunities and even follow on investment opportunities for this particular company. So, we went through a lot of the traditional diligence that most venture firms will go through. That includes, really having a good understanding of the co-founders as well as the overall management team, that cohesion, the backgrounds, their complementary skill sets, and how that applies to the actual business. We, looked at the market opportunity, thinking about where they are, the space that they're playing in. And in this particular case, it's Black hair care market, which we identify as about a $9 billion market, but then also thinking about where that could go, how that could extend out, and some interesting things. And I can talk about Maven in particular a little bit later in this podcast, but for their company, what was really intriguing is opportunities to impact the unbanked or underbanked, which, would have implications for a broader market for Maven to tap into with their business model. So thinking about that, also thinking about the model itself and how they're integrating the technology. This is a e-commerce based platform, but they're also doing some interesting things on the back end around data collection and informing their overall process, allowing that data to inform their overall process. And then for us, and then obviously, there's the financials element, but even with, these companies, they're so early, a lot of times you're looking for trends in particular top line revenue growth, as well as thinking about, their cash flow needs and how they're managing their cash at that time, because it's very critical for the company. And then for us in particular, we're very interested in the impact piece. And so that's where it gets interesting, right? You think about Maven as an e-commerce platform that's supporting Black hairstylists. There's hundreds of thousands of these individuals across the country, and they're operating in a $9 billion industry. The interesting, dichotomy of all of that is these stylists who are technicians or service providers for the industry are averaging an income annually between $18,000 to $25,000 a year. And so Maven, it serves, leveraging technology to provide distribution services efficiently to these hairstylists. It actually gives them a boost in their income annually, as much as 20%, right? And that can make a really big difference, or a world of difference to this low, income group that Maven is serving, right? But a lot of people may not necessarily make that connection unless they're sort of in that space, or they understand, the hairstylist job and the economics around, being a hairstylist, right? And so the founder, Deshaun, he actually grew up in a home of hairstylists, and he understood what their needs were and how to operate within that to build a business model that they could use and really get something out of in the form of additional income. And so we looked at, we did that research piece, which we added to our overall evaluation of the company. And, for us, we felt that not only could the company be incredibly profitable, and by the way, when we done a sort of post-analysis, Maven at the time was growing at about, making $2 million in revenue a month, right, which was significant. So, not only can they be a profitable business that can scale, but also the impact scales, right? And so every time, they're making money, the hairstylist is also getting commission, right? So the two are tied together, where the company's revenue is dependent on the hairstylist essential income that they're receiving because they're selling through the Maven platform.
Yeah, and so most VCs or companies would look at Maven and say, well, maybe I don't understand the market, or I don't. And so you're sort of catching a lot of these gigantic market opportunities because of your focus on technology and traditionally underserved communities. Is that right?
That's correct. Yeah, and being able to articulate or translate, what that market opportunity really looks like. And I just remember Deshaun, the founder, he had gone through the 500 startups accelerator program, and within his cohort, folks were asking, like, wait, you guys are a tech company? Because they had all these beauty products that they were also shipping out based on demands coming from their stylists who were selling, these products through their platform. And they were like, yeah, we are, and most people wouldn't understand it from the outside, but, we were able to support them in articulating what the opportunity looks like and how technology plays a huge role.
Yeah, it's interesting because Impact America Fund is really, I think, doing an important role of, sort of highlighting communities that are typically underserved and focusing on generating profitability and returns. How do you, one of the challenges I think with the traditional venture model that we've looked at Lyft and with other companies we've discussed is, the venture model is usually, if you say you invest in 10 companies, 9 of 10 fail, and that's okay because you have one that goes like 30x and makes billions of dollars. And it seems like that's a problem, or it has been a problem, because basically you have entrepreneurs and maybe it's women and people of color own businesses who the traditional VC model might not serve quite as well. How do you sort of balance the needs of that like high return profile with also being aware and sensitive to the needs of low and moderate income communities?
I don't think they have to be like sort of one or the other, or necessarily a trade-off. I mean, we really feel that we're identifying the best in class entrepreneurs that, and Maven, proved it, right, by having Andreessen Horowitz, a top prominent VC firm, lead, their $10 million Series A round. But we really feel like these entrepreneurs, a lot of them coming out of, these underserved communities, or just being extensively involved in these communities to a point where they really understand them and can build models for them. We feel like those folks, there are folks who exist, in that space who definitely have the business acumen, and are of the caliber of startup entrepreneurs that can build multi-billion-dollar companies that can yield these outsized market returns. I think it's a matter of being able to find them and how to identify those particular ventures. And we think that, obviously we're, a young fund, and we're growing and we're learning as we grow. But we definitely feel that we have a certain level of competency and understanding around, the social issues of these particular communities, that we can combine that with, how, traditional venture capitalists will look at a business model and be able to place a pretty good bet on companies that we think can definitely yield really attractive returns. And we realize that, obviously, every company, is not going to win, right? But, our companies today have already received over 20 million in follow-on capital, and some of our co-investors, again, are some of the most well-respected VC funds in the country, if not in the world. And so, even if we haven't yet made an exit with a company, and we're still very early to doing that. Not saying that we won't. We definitely hope so, right? But even with that said, a lot of the markers and a lot of the sort of things that we look at to say, hey, our companies are doing pretty damn well, is around that follow-on capital amount. It's around their ability to navigate the terrain that comes with building a large company, and then also just thinking about who's the company that we keep, right? Looking at our co-investors who are interested in our businesses, even the accelerators, Techstars and 500 Startups, those guys who are taking bets on our companies as well. So we feel proud in that way, but we definitely think that there is a lot of opportunity out there where, we're coupling the social impact element around how these business models can significantly impact the needs of low to moderate income groups, with the hyper growth of a true sort of tech startup business model. And we think that they don't have to be, mutually exclusive. We definitely think that there are some gems out there, and we're dedicated to finding them.
Since your involvement at Impact America Fund, have you seen an increase in the amount of women of color in the social entrepreneurship and impact investing communities?
So yes, absolutely. There's definitely been an increase, particularly on the entrepreneur founder side. On the venture capital side, I mean, we represent about, I think the stat is maybe 0.5% of the industry, which is it's pretty unfortunate, but at the same time, I am hopeful. There are more women coming into this space, more African American women, more women of color, who definitely want to diversify the space, who want to be able to have access to the space. So folks like, Keisha, I look at as definitely a pioneer. But then there's, others who are in play and definitely doing some interesting stuff. So Monique Woodward, from 500 Startups, she's actually launching a $25 million fund that's focused on Black and Latino founders. Would definitely be a great person for you to chat with as well. Arlan Hamilton, she's focused on, diversity initiatives and inclusive entrepreneurship. And, she also has a focus on LGBTQ founders. So there are more and more women, who are coming into play, who care about diversity, who care about minority entrepreneurs. And you're definitely seeing that on the VC side, but more strongly on the founder side. There's a larger pool of women of color who are starting businesses all the time. You think about small business ownership in general, and that's beyond just sort of tech startup land. There's a stat, there's about 300 plus businesses that are launched daily by Black women in America, which is pretty phenomenal. So it's not an issue around launching. It's really around growth and how can we build out more infrastructure to support connectivity between the resources that already exist, right? I mean, I see a plethora of resources, whether it's incubators or sources of capital, or technical assistance, or just, information, right? I see a lot of hubs of resources. And I also see a lot of Black women founders, but it's about connecting them together, these two different groups, right? And making sure that those resources are flowing in the right direction to actually elevate that population and allow those companies to grow. And I also think that people are not being counted, so, there's always stats around, the number of Black women founders, but I think there are a lot who are actually have their heads down working and they're not really plugged in and they're not being seen or found rather. And so we also have to find them and know how to find them. And in order to be able to do that, you have to have people who are searching, be people who identify with those communities, right? And sort of look like the folks that you're looking for, right? So if we're talking about how can we increase the flow of capital to Black female founders of technology companies, then you have to ask the question of how can we increase the representation of Black female venture capitalists, right? And not saying that it always has to be that case, but that's a baseline starting point where that at the end of the day, that I would bet that Black female venture capitalist would probably be able to find more easily that Black female tech entrepreneur than some other venture capitalist, right? Just because they're likely, to have an insight on, how, where that person is concentrated in terms of geography, what they're doing, like what books they're reading, what, media channels they're leveraging for information. There's certain community groups that they're tapping into, and they can probably get a good idea of where to find them. So I think that's how we need to start structuring the conversation and thinking about it. Because I don't think it's necessarily a sort of pipeline issue. I think there are definitely folks out there. It's just a matter of changing the process to which we're using to find them. And again, with that, there's also an increase, in these women as we're having these conversations be elevated into mainstream media. So I'm excited.
I love that question. You flipped it on not the African-American entrepreneurs, but African-American female VC. I'll take you up on your question. How do we increase the amount of Black female VCs?
We give them exposure to venture capital. So I think, podcasts like this, right? I don't know what's the likelihood of a Black female stumbling upon your podcast, right? But I have a lot of Black female friends, I'll tell you, who love podcasts and are always searching for cool ones. And so if I can, tweet out or let them know of this, then they get access and they can hear my story and be inspired. Also at Impact America Fund, so, having these narratives is incredibly important, and putting a lot of them out there for people to absorb, to be inspired by, and to just have knowledge about, what's going on in the industry and that the industry even exists. Some people don't even know this industry exists, right? So how can we continue to promote it and make sure people know of these opportunities? For Impact America Fund, we actually are proactive about it. So in order for me to get my position in the fund, I actually went through a 3-month graduate fellowship opportunity with Keisha. So she took a chance on me, initially, and obviously she looked at my previous work and some of the things I had done and felt that it was a great fit. But, we also have to be able to create inroads for folks. And so to sort of pay it forward, I focus on, in the spring and the summer, ways that we can bring on 1 to 2 graduate fellows or folks who, completed extensive amount of work experience, to match, the caliber of individual we would want to come in and support us from a capacity building standpoint. So how can we bring in, folks on a temporary basis to do some work within the fund, get them exposure to core fund activities, and also give them access to our network where they can really start to build a career in venture. And even if it's not in venture, then maybe it's, somewhere that's closely related to that. I mean, we have folks who've come through the program that we've established informally, and they've gone on to work in, economic development agencies. Some have gone on to work in more traditional investment industries, more related to like investment banking or investment management. We have some asset managers of, different asset classes. We have people who've gone on to actually start their own technology companies themselves. And then even others who've actually joined different accelerators or incubators to support the entrepreneurial ecosystem. So even if, they're not directly becoming venture capitalists, after this experience, they're getting exposure to a broader network, right? A broader ecosystem where they can plug in and still contribute in a really cool way. And so we want to be able to continue to do that as much as we can.
You mentioned some reading for folks. Is there a particular book, or who do you look to for, authors or thought leaders or organizations that are really addressing this sort of intersection, these sort of challenges in an effective way? Is there anyone you look to kind of that you could recommend to others?
Yeah, that's a great question, because I personally find myself sort of all over the place with a lot of varied interests, whether it's more sort of on the traditional VC side. I mean, there's a couple of great sources for that. I look at, obviously, Andreessen Horowitz. They have great content and information on their blog posts for, folks who are interested in just understanding traditional VC. I think, like probably most folks in VC land, I've read the 0 to 1 by Peter Thiel. That book is pretty great. You're thinking about, the value and how to create value that's in, that you're looking for when you're looking at a technology company, and what it takes to actually create that value as a startup founder. And so being able to look at the, how value is articulated and how it's defined and thought about, almost from a founder standpoint, is very helpful, because it can inform how you approach analysis as an investor. On the social impact side, we have, so many folks who are like always thinking about these things, right? And, at the end of the day, we have a couple of great partners, that are really taking a, hard line on social impact, right? And leading with that and wanting to know how companies are really measuring that impact. And so like a great, obviously our obvious partner is the B Lab folks, who we work with to really help us educate and support our own portfolio companies on what metrics look like for their business models and how to track those over time and how to tell the narrative around the impact piece. Because it's not always clear when we're initially pursuing a company, right? And that's okay. It doesn't have to be crystallized because, again, when you're building a company from scratch, you're going to have pivot points and things are going to evolve and change over time as you collect more data and you synthesize that data, right? But at the same time, you want to also have some general focus point in terms of how your impact is driven. And, if we can do that better and better, every time with our portfolio companies as they grow, that's incredibly valuable and insightful for our companies. So, they're a great group of folks that we work with on the impact piece to not only understand what's going on in that space from an impact investing standpoint, but then also being able to use actual tools to deploy to our portfolio companies in a way that can really expand the narrative around the work that they're doing, and also allow them to bring in new partners, that they may have never thought about, just because they're able to articulate, their business model in a way that's relevant to those additional parties who would be interested.
And what's the change? Like, imagine 25, 50, 100 years, Impact America Fund is wildly successful. What's sort of the change you wish you're hoping to see in the world from the results of your work?
That's a big question. I mean, I think I'm already seeing, some of it, and obviously these things play out over time, right? Over years. So what I'm seeing today is, and what I'm, getting excited about is sort of this democratizing of access for entrepreneurs and for entrepreneurship. So I think we've started to get a good grasp on how to use the internet and how to use digital tools, right, in a way where we're not just finding information and collecting it, but we're able to synthesize it and share it. And through that, more and more people are able to more affordably and more quickly build companies than ever before. And through that, I think when you're able to almost level the playing field in that regard, you start to see an emerging of opportunity, right? And so that's sort of the premise for us when we look at Impact America Fund. Like, what are the spaces of opportunity where people are building in a way that is community oriented, but can really create some pretty cool, some pretty profitable companies, right? And that's through this access. And I feel that as that becomes more expansive, we'll definitely start to see. I'm hopeful that we'll see things start to change in the economy for the better, but also in terms of how they're directly supporting people in the form of jobs, in the form of income, and more importantly, in the form of wealth creation. And the reason I say that's the most important is because it's about the sustainability, right? The sustainability and elevation of communities. And if folks are able to get that right, through entrepreneurship and through access, then you can really see the landscape change in terms of how people are able to support themselves in a way that's long lasting, but that can also start to reduce some of these income gaps and wealth gaps that we're seeing disproportionately based on essentially where people come from, right? Which, is not cool. So I really see that as sort of the big win or the big success.
Last two things. So what do you need right now? Like, how can people help you further the work you're doing?
We have a website, and I know that that may sound like, something that is somewhat dismissive, but I promise you, we actively respond to each and every person who actually reaches out to us through this website. So that's the easiest way to find us. You'll find us at www.impactamericafund.com. That's the first step. We're obviously on Twitter, and we have some social media accounts, so you can find us on there. And Ryan, I'm sure you'll probably post some information about that. But we're always looking for strategic partners. Obviously, we're always looking for best-in-class entrepreneurs. And if you have a pretty innovative business plan, you think you're a match for us based on what we talked about today in terms of what Impact America Fund is looking for, feel free to share that with us through our web portal. We also, are thinking more and more about data and research. And, while we do some of that already, we can always get better at it, and we can always increase our capacity to do this work. And we'd love to have it better inform our impact verticals around health, education, and economic sustainability, but also our investment decisions, how we're thinking about our companies, and we're thinking about next level of our companies in terms of not only profitability, obviously, but also the scale of the impact. So, that's something that we're looking for in terms of an outlet to support that work. And, I guess I'm always looking for limited partners. So perspectives who, are interested in working with us, as an LP or potential supporter through funding. I mean, that's something that's always helpful for us. And, we're always thinking about what's next for Impact America Fund. So would love to have those conversations as well.
I love it. The shout out to the LPs. That's awesome.
Right. We love you and appreciate you, by the way.
Great. Well, thanks so much, Stefanie. It's been a real amazing talk. I love learning about what you're doing, and hopefully we'll get to do it again soon.
Yeah, this was great. Thanks for having me. And I look forward to listening to future interviews with your guests.
Next Economy Now is a production of Lift Economy. To listen to all of our past episodes, visit www.lifteconomy.com. You can also subscribe to this podcast in iTunes, Overcast, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcast. Once again, thanks for listening.